Hello and welcome to the Transformation Project, a podcast and community for women who are looking to transform into the best version of themselves, no matter where they're at. A place where you can listen, learn and laugh along with us as we dive deep into different topics to help you live a happier, healthier and more fulfilled life. Remember, we are all learning here together, and therefore the content and opinions of the hosts and our guests should not be taken as medical advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions.
Hello and welcome back to the Transformation Project. We're so excited to have you with us here today. It has been a week. Just went back to school holidays for us. So I have some peace and quiet in my house. Usually on school holidays, so I have an 11-year-old and a 20-year-old. And I have, because of the big age gap, I guess, my 11-year-old almost feels like an only child. And so I have like 1,000 little girls over here every school holiday. And my house is always full, which is the way I like it. I can't complain. But so it's nice to have a little bit of peace and quiet now that the kids are back to school today. How was your week, ladies?
Well, Kinsley still goes to daycare, so I still shipped her off to daycare during school holidays. My week was good. Otherwise, Kinsley had her first really, really big temper tantrum in the grocery store, which was fun. Ben and I came home and reflected on that. So those
are the days. I can remember carrying. So my eldest, I can't remember her ever having a temper tantrum actually, but Savannah, who was the youngest, was the queen of tantrums. I can remember carrying her out of shopping centers under my arm like a football.
That's how we carried Kinsley out.
Yeah. And she was banned from Big W for 2 years because every time we went into Big W, she had a temper tantrum and ran away and hid. So she was banned for 2 years for misbehavior.
We're not at that stage yet. Hopefully we don't get there, but
okay, fine. She's much better now, let me tell you. She's like super reasonable these days.
It doesn't take long though till they grow up, Jess. And I do, I actually had a house full of kids during the school holidays as well. And, our kids' ages range from 13, nearly 14 to 22. So, it's never dull. I just know whenever they leave a cyclone in the house, and I've refused to acknowledge it. This is my full week at work. So there is still washing sitting in the middle of the dining room table, and I'm just eating around it till I have time to clean it up. So whatever happens.
Yeah.
I love your commitment. What was Kinsley's temper tantrum about?
We had just gone into the grocery store to pick up a couple things. And we walked by strawberries. So I was like, Ben grabbed some strawberries and put them in the cart. And she was like, I want a strawberry. And we were like, yeah. Like, this is the last thing we're getting. We'll just pay. And she just lost it, like full out kicking, screaming, hands hit the ground, just screaming. And then she took off. And I'm 9 months pregnant. I said to Ben, go get her. I'll go pay for the groceries. Like, I'm not dealing with her.
You can tap out of that one. You have full permission.
So I went and paid, and like, I could just hear her screaming, and Ben, got her and carried her out, and they went outside and waited, and she was still like kicking and screaming. And then I went over and tried to speak to her, and she just wouldn't stop. She's obviously had meltdowns before, but it was never to this extent. It was never like, we cannot get her to settle down, like, and talk any reason into her. So I just picked her up and we just walked out. I said, we're done. No shopping mall. Nope. You don't get to stay at the shopping mall. You don't get any strawberries. She cried the whole way home. Strawberries. And then it turned into, I hungry. And she wasn't, because we had just given her something to eat. Anyways. So that was an experience.
Yeah. It's amazing how quickly they get manipulative like that with stuff. Like, we kind of knew if she yelled enough, sooner or later, someone may well fold.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, if it was just me grocery shopping with her, I would have just opened the strawberries and given them to her. I'm not going to chase her around at the moment.
And you've had some hassles recently around eating and dinner and whatnot, haven't you?
Yeah, like, for the most part, she is a good eater, and I really can't complain. But we have had some things. It's more temper, I guess, but like some things just thrown on the floor. And she's never done that before. No, I don't want this. Yeah, like, okay, well, Kinsey, this is what we're having for dinner. And then just like grab, dump. And you're like, I kind of want to laugh. I kind of want to push you. Like, no, you don't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can remember with Savannah watching her eat, and she used to take forever. She was super fussy as a little one. She's not bad anymore. She tries lots of different things now, but as a little girl, I can remember sitting with her at the table and trying to get her to eat whatever it was. We used to pretend to be Dora Explorer and like the train is coming and all kinds of nonsense. And then one day I just got irritated and I walked away and I just left her sitting at the table. And as soon as there was nobody watching her, she ate her food on her own, in her own time, with nobody having a discussion about it. And so we kind of realized like she has her own like deal. When I was a kid, I can't even complain about what she does. When I was little, I did not like carrots or peas. My mum used to make carrots and peas every day. And so whenever I would sit there for so long that everybody would leave. And we had this old fashioned kind of Dutch sideboard, as well as some clogs on the wall. And so as soon as nobody was looking, I had three options. I would either throw my vegetables out the window at the dogs that were out there, or I would fill the clogs with carrots and peas, or underneath the Dutch sideboard, there was like, I guess, a bracing beam. And I lined all my stuff up on that bracing beam, all my veggies. And I'd never considered why nobody ever caught me. And so obviously this is back in South Africa, people back in the day. So we had a lady that worked in our house. She actually lived on our property and she worked in our house. And she didn't want me to get in trouble. So she knew I was doing it. And so she would empty out the veggies so that nobody would catch me shoving my veggies and peas in all the things. But I just wouldn't eat them. And then over the years, I guess that changed. But for me, I think, and this is where I always struggle with my own kids, because I want them to finish their food. Well, I don't want them to waste food. But as a child, I was forced to finish everything that was on my plate. And so as an adult, that became a problem, because even when I was so full that I thought I was going to be ill, I would still need to finish everything, even if I was full. And so I actually went through a phase where even if I thought I was hungry, I would purposely leave food on my plate, like every time I ate, to try and break myself out of that. And it's still an issue for me sometimes, where I'll eat something because it's there and I want the plate to be empty. I feel like I can't leave food. So I don't know. Do you guys have anything like that? Do you?
I have a similar thing. So when we were younger, we used to be the same. We would have to eat everything on our plate until we were done. And I actually had a same thing with the carrots and the peas. Yvette, my mum was away one time and my dad cooked tinned carrots, and they really smelled bad. And so I didn't want to eat them, and he made me eat them. So I actually was sick all over the table. And that, that's one of those things that has stuck in my mind forever. And my brother used to hide his food, like in the television room. He used to go and he'd sit down after school and eat some food, but the rest of it he'd hide underneath. So, every couple of months when we'd move everything out to have a clean, you just find all this rotten food underneath it, which was really disgusting because we didn't have a cleaner. But talking about being forced to eat everything on your plate, we had the same thing when we were younger as well. And I agree, it can really create some issues, because psychologically, even when you go to a cafe or a restaurant, right? And I'm more like this when I go to a restaurant, because you're not in control of what gets put on your plate, but you've also paid for it. So you don't want to lose, like, you're like, I paid for this, I want to eat it all. And I'm stuffed full, I'm still going to eat it all. So that's a little bit of a thing for me. But one of the things that we do with our kids at home is I try as much as possible to get them to dish up their own meals for size. But because we have a multitude of kids in different ages in our house too, one of the things that I noticed early on when we did the whole blended family thing was some kids would literally go fast and hard and put as much on their plate as they could. And then there wasn't enough for everybody else. And so consciously I would be like, that's fine. You put that much food on your plate, you need to eat it all. And even when they get halfway through and they're like, oh, I'm full now. And I'm like, nope, you put that on your plate. Other people have missed out. You need to eat it all. So that was me putting on my mean pants. But at the end of the day, I feel like they need to also accept some responsibility when you're doing stuff like that, and you're taking more than what should be your fair share, that you're then responsible to eat it too. So that was a bit mean.
That was me. I was that person. food's ready. I'm the first one there, filled up my plate. I would usually eat it all, but my mom was always like, there's nothing left. You got 3 other brothers and sisters. You don't need this much. But I did eat a lot. I do really like food, but I do have the same issue. Like I will finish everything on my plate, and I'll often, like if it's like an event, like Christmas dinner or something like that, I'll go back for seconds, even if I'm full.
Yeah. I wonder what that's about. There's got to be some logic to that. Somebody, I recall, with trying to get your kids to like eat more fruits and veggies, was suggesting that you plate up in the kitchen the protein and the starch yourself. And so then the only extras that are on the table are like veggies and salad. Because I certainly know with my kids, they will take a lot of rice. And then if we have rice or whatever it is, they'll take a lot of whatever that starch is, and then a little bit of the protein. And then there's not enough, and they might have more than one helping of that, and then not enough of the vegetables, and leave the vegetables behind. So one of the suggestions was to plate that stuff up in the kitchen so that if they're still hungry at the table, they have to have like a veggie or like a crudité plate, if you cut up like your capsicums or whatever, and they can pick on that, but they can't have more, like just rice, for example, or pasta.
Yeah.
Something with no nutrition in it. But I love that you have Kinsley in the kitchen. And I would pay for that YouTube channel.
That is honestly, like, I think 2 things have helped her be a good eater. One, we started young, even before she started eating solids. I did try to make sure I always had a large variety of stuff. And I think that got into the breast milk, and she was used to the taste. Like she eats Indian food. Like I remember I didn't try Indian food until I was like 15. Chinese food was like the cheap buffet, like the fake Chinese food. But Kinsley will eat, she'll try anything, but her being in the kitchen definitely makes the biggest thing. And I'll be cutting something, and because she wants to be a part of it, she like will grab it and try it. Like broccoli.
As fast as you can put it in the bowl sometimes.
Yes, sometimes faster.
Yeah. And all different stuff. So she's eating most veggies and.
Yeah. I'm trying to think what she doesn't eat. She did go through a phase where she wasn't a fan of meat. Like she'd eat beans and tofu and stuff, but she was a bit weary with meat. I think it was more the chewing.
Yeah.
But now that she's older, like that doesn't really seem to be an issue. She's 2.5 now. And honestly, like we'll go to the grocery store. Like if I put broccoli in the shopping cart, I need to get another one for her so that she can munch on it right there and then. She is really good with trying everything, but I think it's because we did start so early.
Yeah.
I think that definitely made it.
And I think taking her to the grocery store and stuff like that is really important too. I think a lot of kids, they don't know what their food looks like until it arrives on their plate already made into whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I know we've taken friends of Savannah's to the shop, and they won't recognize a fruit or a vegetable in its raw form. Like they don't know what it is. And so we often, in the beginning, we would let Savannah come with us, and she would choose something different, like choose a vegetable or a fruit or something that she hadn't tried before. And then it was up to her what she chose. Just had to be something, one of the things had to be something different. And then we would figure out how to prepare it when we got home, because sometimes I wouldn't even know. But then at least we've got around that. Well, Savvy would have more, she'd be more open to trying it because she chose it herself.
Yeah.
Or if we have a particular meal, I don't know, like if we're having mince, for example, tonight we're having mince, but you can choose if we have meatballs or we have, spaghetti bolognese, gluten-free pasta, or if we were having, something else. I sometimes make something called bobotie, which is a South African kind of curried mince dish that my family really loves. So she gets to choose what she does with it, and again would have more likeliness, I guess,
for her to eat it. Yeah, totally. Yeah. If we're making something and it's like, I don't want to say weird vegetables, but vegetables that she's not super comfortable with, like the other day I had chestnuts and she just like had a little bite and was like, nah, this is weird. Obviously the texture. And I just said, okay, do you want cucumber and carrots cut up? Yes. So we just, in those situations, instead of her just not having any vegetables, I just always have raw ones in the fridge. And it's like, okay, that's fine. Kind of what you were just saying, just giving her the option.
Yeah.
Pick a different one then.
I actually like what you said about getting them involved in the choice, even from the grocery store level too, though, and getting them to look and try different things, because it starts with us, right? The things that we model as normal becomes their normal too. And I mean, I've worked in childcares and over the years and all sorts of different things, and you get kids like, I remember one kid, he would only eat spaghetti. Like, he would only eat spaghetti. And so because we're busy, right, we try to fit in so many things. We're like, Jesus, as long as he's eating something, let's just give him spaghetti. And it becomes easy. But instead of working on it from a younger age and really giving them that exposure to that, we go for the easiest model. So, it's tough. Parenting is tough when we try to do the right things. And obviously there's ways that you can try to make things a little bit simpler. Actually, when my kids were younger, Savannah was 3, and I came second in a songwriting competition about a song that I wrote about a fussy 3-year-old eater. And it got...
You surprise me all the time. Okay. This is a story we will explore more at another day, but carry on with that.
Yeah, it was recorded. I have it on CD. Savannah is actually in it, like talking as a 3-year-old feeder and saying, "Ooh, yuck, that's disgusting," in a really, really cute little 3-year-old voice. So we got recorded in a recording studio and everything. It was very fun.
That is epic.
Oh, cool.
I have to know more about that. Okay, we're going to investigate that more.
That's so cool.
So I guess you can say that your kids can always be your muse, right?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things with the moms I was talking to the other day, she was saying like, she commented on my Instagram and she's like, "Oh, Kinsley is such a good eater. I wish my kids were like that." And we were having a conversation and she's like, "Oh," she wasn't saying it's too late, but she's saying my kids are older. Sort of. She was saying it's too late to make my kids good eaters. And it just made me think, when I'd have to ask my mom, but probably like 12, my mom, I don't know if she was going on a diet or what it was, or just wanted to be healthier, but she started buying tomato juice and V8 juice. Do you guys have V8 juice here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the tomato-y stuff. And anyway, so I'm sure the first time I tried it and it was disgusting, but because she had it every single day, I was more likely to have it. And I did end up drinking it every night with dinner. I don't think all my brothers and sisters did, but it was just watching her do it. I was 12. Anyway, so speaking to this mom, and I was like, no, it's not too late. Like, and I think, but what you said before, it's easy. It's easy just to be like, have the spaghetti then, here you go. But it's just getting them used to those tastes. You can go scientific about it, but like getting their gut bacteria used to those tastes and craving those tastes and having the good bacteria. And one of the things we do with Kinsley, she doesn't taste it, but she willingly puts it in. Every time we make a smoothie, there's always spinach in there. And then I've done so many different things, but like broccoli stems, cauliflower stems, mushrooms, peas, like things that you don't taste, because if you put fruit in there, it totally overpowers it. But at least you're still getting those nutrients into your body. And then the gut bacteria is tasting that, like stuff like that. Spaghetti sauce. I put so much random stuff in spaghetti sauce or any kind of pasta sauce. Like,
you can hide 1,000 things in that.
So many things. And she doesn't know, and she eats it and you're like, okay, sweet. She just ate, a whole bunch of cauliflower and tomatoes and onions and carrots. And like, yeah, she's got no idea. I just blend it up and done, easy.
I think it's really cool though that because I've seen you do that, make the smoothies, and she puts the broccoli and whatever in it herself. And I think it's really important that, I guess, in Kinsley's mind now, smoothies have broccoli and cauliflower and spinach in them, and that's just what they have.
Yeah.
And similar to what you were saying earlier, is that a lot of people, and I get it, like, man, kids can be frustrating. Like, if I only had the willpower that my children have shown sometimes, I can't even imagine what I would accomplish in my life. But it's still important to not give up. Just not go, well, I keep throwing away vegetables. I'm just not going to make vegetables anymore. I'm not going to waste my time. Or my children only eat sausage and chips. I'm not going to make, chicken breast or anything else because all they eat is sausage. And it kind of takes away that process where even if they're not eating the vegetables, your child is seeing that there's vegetables on the table and realizing that a normal meal contains vegetables. So that as they grow up and perhaps they get more experimental with what they're prepared to try and they leave your house, in their mind, they still know inside that a regular meal still has vegetables, even though you struggle to get them. And 2, to not be picky yourself, because I think for a lot of us, we only eat certain vegetables, even as adults. And so I guess if our kids don't see us trying anything different, Or if dad only has a very specific thing he eats, and so mom caters to dad, and so, well, then we all are allowed to do that. Which brings up another thing, is people cooking different meals for different people in their family. And I have a few friends who do that. And I have a big hell no on that one, because nobody has time for that. I don't have time for that.
Not a restaurant.
Not a restaurant.
My mom used to say that to us all the time. This is not a restaurant. This is what we're having for dinner. We were a lot of us, like, it would be like Karen, like a lot of kids. So every day, like my mom would go to the grocery list and she would be like, okay, Jess, you pick what we're eating on Monday. Meg, you pick Tuesday. So everyone got something they liked every week, but it was like, this isn't a restaurant. I'm not making hamburgers for you, pasta for you. No, not a restaurant.
Because otherwise there's no choice.
We do a variation in our house because half of us are vegetarian and half of us are meat eaters. So, you know, we'll pick something as an example, like a sushi bowl, and then do a meat, you know, the meat and then the vegetarian options to go into the same thing, but still following the same structure. So we definitely don't cook two different meals, but we cater for both, which I think is important too, because the other thing with kids, like you said, Kinsley early on, she didn't really like meat, and that's cool. And you kind of work around that, and she gets a taste for it. But when they get a bit older and they're like, no, I don't really want to eat it, I feel like you need to respect that as well.
Yeah, fully agree. We had the same. My sister decided she was a vegetarian. She's never really liked meat. I can still remember the day she realized that the chicken drumstick on her plate was a leg of a chicken. And she would have been about, I don't know, 7. And when she was about 14, she was like, no, I'm a vegetarian. And that was a big fight in our family because, you know, we were just, you're South Africans eat meat. I'm pretty sure is what my granddad or my grandmother said. And to this day, she's a vegetarian. That's never changed. It doesn't mean that she doesn't necessarily like the taste of meat, or that, you know, she's very athletic. So sometimes if she's out in the Papua New Guinea and she's depleted, she might go and catch fish herself and eat that fish. So she's sensible about it, but it was a decision that she's made and that we've all had to, I guess, respect. And I have a sneaky suspicion Savannah may end up down that same path herself.
I think Kinsley might as well.
Yeah. And it's something that you have to respect. And I think that's something we have to discuss too, is that there's certain kids who obviously are not just picky eaters. And it's probably important as parents to try and differentiate as quickly as possible, especially with young children. If your child is simply a picky eater and it's just a behavioral learned thing, or if there's something else going on, there might be some kind of sensory issue or something else. And then obviously that's a completely different kettle of fish to what we're speaking about.
Yeah.
I think the sensory thing's a really good point, Yvette, because it is. And when they're younger, they can't necessarily communicate that really well. But I know for my kids, like there is stuff that just the texture, like peaches, as an example, I just have to say the word peaches around 2 of my kids and they're like, from the skin. Like, so they're so sensory heightened based on even just the experience of having had that in the past. And so even if you were to take the skin off and give them the peach without the skin now, they still have that connection with it. And so it's really about learning and listening. And actually Eli is now 16, but when he was younger, we would feed him. Initially had dairy, and then he was always really that big Biafran kind of stomach thing happening, looked like he'd, you know, puffed him up with a straw, but skinny everywhere else. And so we took him off dairy and gluten, and he kind of went down a little bit. But I noticed when we'd give him soy and other products that he would get like red around his mouth. So, you know, there's so many different clues about different things, and we're really lucky now that we are spoilt for choice in relation to options around food alternatives too. But I do think it's really important to try and give your kids, and coming back to you, Jess, as well, talking about the gut bacteria. Your gut bacteria dictates the messages to your brain to feed them what they need to thrive. So if you are a sugar lover and you know, all you're craving is sugar, it's probably because that microbiome are the biggest, most dominant microbiome are the ones that want the sugar to survive. So they're messaging to your brain. So if we're feeding our kids more prebiotic food, so those fruit, vegetables, nuts and seeds as an example, that bacteria are then going to become more dominant and then send the messaging to the brain that that's the kind of stuff that they want to eat, which is what you've done so successfully with Kinsley. But if you're only giving spaghetti, mate, the spaghetti bacteria down there they're kings.
Yeah, just want more spaghetti.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's different things that you could do. I mean, until it gets to the point like your kids, Karen, who they're like, a peach is a peach is a peach. But I know in our house, just my husband, for example, he likes broccoli, for just as an example, fried. You can't bake the broccoli, you can't boil the broccoli because the texture is different. And so for a lot of kids, they may not eat a particular vegetable in a certain way, but if you had to not cook the capsicum but cut it up and give it to them raw, maybe they'd have more chance of eating the capsicum. Or if they don't eat, a chicken breast, but you can cut it up into little squares and put it on a stick with something to dip it in, maybe they would. So, different ways of preparing different food and letting them try it in different forms, soup or a dip or, raw, boiled, baked, like they all have a different texture and a different taste. So I would suggest to parents to maybe, if you're wanting to try and do that, is try and change the way you're presenting it or the way that you're cooking it. And that may help encourage your kids to eat whatever it is that they're eating.
My brother was like that. My mom wasn't a huge vegetable lover. So like every meal had mashed potatoes. So she could hide her broccoli or whatever in the mashed potatoes and eat it that way. That's always, so like we had mashed potatoes often, but my brother just flat out refused mashed potatoes. It was a texture thing. He hated them, but you could cook potatoes, you could bake them any other way you wanted to do them, like in chunks, no problem. He'd always eat them.
There's so many kids these days who will eat potatoes as fries, and that are not getting to experience so many different things, I think. And this is something, I guess, because my mom used to work in the hotel industry. She used to basically sell conferences. That was her job when I was a kid in a really big hotel chain. And so I would go along, she was a single mom, I would go along to these conferences and they would have these big dinners, 15 courses with the sorbet in between and all that stuff. So I learned really early in my life what to do if I'm faced with like 15 knives and forks, which one does what, but also had to try a whole lot of different foods because quite often I was the only child there. And these days, I think you go out to a restaurant and they automatically bring it doesn't matter what restaurant it is, they bring your child the kids menu, which has got, I don't know, burgers and chips, nuggets and chips, fish fingers and chips, I don't know, maybe a spaghetti or something. And then, and so for us, we've always quite strongly avoided the kids menu for both my children. Firstly, because Savannah doesn't generally eat gluten and everything on the kids menu has gluten, but also she has always been more prone to try different things if she's eating it off our plates. So we don't necessarily even order a meal for her. She just gets a side plate and she tries little bits of everybody's stuff on her plate, lots of different flavors. And so because of that, we know now that we can pretty much go to any different type of cuisine at any different restaurant and there will be something that she will eat, as opposed to Kiara Lee when she was little would only eat spaghetti plain with cheese for a very long time because I did not have the emotional anything to fight. I was in other areas of my life, I was fought out and I didn't have any fight left to fight with her. So I just gave in. And so she would just go for it and eat what she's given then, which was what she wanted.
Yeah, it is that balance because it is a fight. And especially like for a long time, 2 to 10, they probably fight with you. Probably even later than that. You guys could tell me if it's later than that. Hopefully it's not. But
Karen's nodding. She's like, well, I have a 22-year-old who
they know what they eat by that stage. But even say Tom, who's the youngest, who's 13, 14, they come with these defined beliefs about, I don't like capsicum or I don't eat bananas or but they don't give you the reason why. Not like I don't like the taste of it. I just don't like it. And so I'm always like, oh, just try it, because your taste buds also change over time too. So I think going back and trying things every now and then is actually a really positive thing. And also spicy food as an example, because we love spicy food. Whereas Tom initially is like, can't even sniff a piece of pepper in his food. He's like, it's too hot. So now we've just progressively been training him to eat spicier food and now he really likes it. So it's good. I think don't give up on your kids, but also I get it, Yvette, too, right? Sometimes there is so much other stuff going on in life. The battle is not worth it. So if they're having food, that's a good thing. I don't class Coke as food, so that's not a great thing. But
for me, nuggets and chips is not food.
Yeah.
But
so
I guess it depends on your perspective.
And so we'll probably have people who are listeners who that's their reality and they're the decisions they're making, and that's okay, right? Because we do the best with what we have at the time, but we also have clearly defined, like your nuggets and chips and I'm Coke as an example, like those things will never enter my body. And if I have any choice, they'll never enter my children's bodies, but people do that all the time, right? So I think at the end of the day, you need to kind of work out what your goal is and then find a way to work around that, because we obviously, the three of us, have a really high value around health, so we are consciously making choices towards healthy things. And I'm like the 80-20 rule too, right? So 80% of the time I'm trying to do the best, 20% of the time I'm going to eat whatever I want, except for Coke, because not food. So but you got to kind of give yourself a little bit of leeway in that space as well.
Totally. And I think that's really important, bringing up the 80-20, because I have a girlfriend, her mom is, I think she's a nutritionist, or maybe she's a naturopath, but she was brought up with a very, very strict diet. And she like completely rebelled when she was 16 and was just like, nah, literally having cupcakes for dinner. Like, you cannot tell me what to do anymore. And it took her a long time. She was we're 31 now. So it would have been, she would have been like 25 before she finally was like, yeah, crap, I'm really not healthy, because she rebelled so hard against it, because there was never a cupcake in the house. There was never any sweets. And it was always like, you can't have this. This is a bad food. And she still has like a relatively negative relationship with food. So I think the 80-20 rule is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fell into that same thing as well. So when we first discovered that how important food was in Kiara Lee's behavior and her concentration, all of that food was out of our house for all of us. And especially when you can see improvements in your children, it's so tempting to just keep going with that. And so for a long time, I'm like, my kids called me the food Nazi, because there was no crappy food. There still is generally no crappy food in my house. I'm a little bit more, because we have lots of other kids in our house now that come and visit that don't eat a lot of different things. And the fact that my children don't want to be that kid who has the weird lunchbox. So I've had to kind of work around that as well and try and make sure that I'm doing the best that I can without causing an issue, because Kiara Lee did the same thing. So as soon as she was able to eat without me knowing what she was eating, her choices were always the food she knew that she wouldn't be allowed to eat in the house. And so she is now 20, and only kind of end of last year, beginning of this year, has she really started paying attention to what she's eating and what she's fueling her body with, because she's one of those people who always has been athletic, and she's never had to worry about being overweight. She's never had to worry about, any of those stuff. And for a lot of our kids, they're like, well, I'm not fat, so I'm fine. They don't consider the healthfulness or their immune systems or whatever. They just think that nothing can happen to them. And so for Kiara, it took a pretty severe health crisis for her to really start paying attention as an adult to what she was eating, which can be frustrating, especially when you have children who know probably more about what nutritious food is than most of the adults around them. And yet they'll still make that choice because it's tempting to just do what your friends do.
Yeah, 100%. Going back to what you just said, I actually got a phone call today from the daycare. It was a new teacher. I haven't spoken to her much, and Kinsley doesn't eat dairy. We cut dairy out, and the school knows that, and they're awesome. But she called and she's like, it's someone's birthday here today, and they've brought in cupcakes, and everyone's having a cupcake except Kinsley's sitting at the table with nothing. And she just looks so sad. Is it okay if she has a cupcake? And I was like, yes, she can have a cupcake. Like, I don't really we cut out dairy because she gets a little bit of eczema. She's not going to die.
Yeah.
Yes. And just what you said about your kids don't want to be the kids with the weird lunchbox. That's kind of what it made me feel like. The school there is really good. They'll cook, pasta and hers just won't have the cheese in it kind of thing. So I don't think she feels like that normally, but
Yes.
because she was the only one sitting there without a cupcake, I was just like, oh, like, yes, it's a special occasion. She can have a cupcake.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot smarter with Savannah, and I know a lot more because back then I was learning as I was going, as to finding out all these different ingredients that I've never heard of before, suddenly trying to make recipes taste good. But my family still laughs about quinoa porridge that I think gives them nightmares to this day, because I was just trying to find alternatives. And back then, I didn't know enough. There wasn't enough information out there. A lot of the sort of convenience type healthy foods that are out there were not available back then. And so I was learning along at the same time. And so now with Savannah, she knows what she can and can't eat and what's not great and what's okay for her as far as her health and what affects her, because she doesn't have dairy or gluten. But unlike her older sister, where I was really regimental, I allow Savannah to manage a lot more of her choices around that. Because we know that generally when she's in our house, majority of the stuff, like I'm the one who does the cooking, I'm the one that does the shopping. So I try not to have things in the house that she can access every day that are not great for her. And then when her friends come over and they want some sweets or chips or whatever, then it's not such a big deal. But I think it's that very careful balance between making an issue around their food and making sure that they're eating well. And I think all of those things, taking them shopping with you, letting them make some choices of their own, getting them involved in the kitchen, making sure you keep serving the same food, maybe in different forms, but is it like 20 different times that you need to try something before you really know whether you like it or you don't?
Yeah.
So, I mean, a kid's not going to know that the first time. So you kind of have to keep trying that. And I think too, not just going, well, you didn't eat your dinner, but now you can have a cheese sandwich because I don't want you to go to bed hungry. My grandmother used to go, well, if you didn't finish it, it's going to go in the fridge. And if you're hungry later, you can still have that. And that's pretty old-timey, but I still like that. And the same way, well, you can't have dessert if you didn't have your dinner. And the snacking. So much snacking these days. I feel like kids are constantly having to be snacking.
I definitely have that issue with Kinsley.
Then they don't want to have dinner because
when she's home, she just wants to snack.
Yeah.
All the time. Yeah.
And maybe that's okay. Like if your kid, I've had to be a lot more aware because of my own things around food that sometimes Savannah just isn't hungry. Kiara used to have for lunch, she had this thing called a fridge to go. And it was like a lunchbox, but it was actually made to take like a 6-pack of beers. And that thing would be filled to the brim every day and it would come back empty and she was starving. Savannah sometimes can have like a couple of pieces of fruit and like some cut up carrots and she's fine for the whole day. She might come back with some left. And so not because she just wasn't hungry. And I have to learn to respect that as well, that sometimes that they're not hungry, but that doesn't mean she can just be not hungry and she still has to sit at the dinner table. She still has to have maybe some salad and she doesn't get to go and have dessert after that. She has to actually have dinner if she's hungry later.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think teaching them to listen to their own bodies is something that we were never taught. Listen to their own bodies and respecting that too. And one of the things, Jess, that we were learning with the Tyler Tolman thing in relation to snacking before meals is like if your kids come and ask for fruit as an example or salad or, cucumbers and bits and pieces, let them ruin their dinner with that. Like if snacking is potato crisps and lollies, that's not such an awesome thing. But if it's whole food, like go nuts, it comes dinner time, they're like, yeah, I'm not really hungry. Okay, that's fine. And again, I agree though that you wouldn't then go, okay, let's go and you can have pudding.
Yeah.
It's a decision. You have to have some dinner first if you are actually hungry. And then and also coming back to foods that they don't like to eat as well, or they don't necessarily get to eat at home. So when they're out of that regime, they go nuts and feed themselves all this terrible stuff. One of the things that I like to share with the clients that come into our clinic is teaching them to then listen to their body. So if they do go nuts and they have a big weekend on sugar and then see how they feel the next day, like what's your energy level like, what's your skin like getting them to really tune back into themselves, because I think a lot of the time we look outside of ourselves to the answer when really the answers are inside.
For sure. I know we went away for the weekend and we had probably a lot more, like we were in a hotel room. We didn't have, which is something I usually wouldn't do, but at the moment in Queensland, it's really hard to get accommodation over holidays. So we didn't have a kitchen, and so we ate a lot of takeout. And I have noticed my energy levels this week, even though it was, healthy-ish takeout, my energy levels this week are a lot lower. And so it's important, I guess, for kids to start realizing. Savannah's had to put those two things together really quickly. If she eats the foods that don't agree with her, she will be unwell. Kiara Lee, if she has a lot of sugar or colors, she doesn't kind of have the hyperactivity that she used to, but she does get a headache and feels really unwell. So it's just those sorts of things where you're having to realize that something's going on and make your children understand, what did you have to eat yesterday? Mommy, I have a headache. Mommy, I have a tummy ache. Okay, let's think about what you ate. Because very often, if our dog is vomiting or our dog's not feeling well, the first thing we think of is, what did my dog eat? And so even though we're humans, still, a lot of the time, whatever's happening with us, it goes back to that. So the same thing with your children. If they do have something, they go and they, have lots and lots of chocolate, or some slushies are my absolute worst, like the blue ones. I want to lose my mind. We had a blue slushie. Great. Okay, so I have a headache now. I don't feel well. What did we eat? Maybe that. Perhaps next time we don't have the whole slushie. Maybe we can make a different choice. And so just have a discussion with the kids around that. But anyway, so hopefully some of our discussion today help you in your house with your kids, and maybe with you too, to not be fussy and picky around your food. Hopefully you'll expand your diet too. Hope you guys have an incredible week, and we will see you again next week. Bye.